Mississippi River State Park. I am your park interpreter, Cara, and I'm really grateful that you're joining us today for a taste of the land. Now, our mission at the park is to provide you with quality access to the St. Francis National Forest and to inspire personal connections with the river, the ridge, and the Arkansas Delta. Looking around, there are several factors that shaped this area that we see today, but I was hoping to explore one that's often overlooked, and that's the role of food. People in past communities that became Mississippi River State Park used the forest, river, and ridge to create the food staples we still enjoy today. I was hoping that maybe by creating a traditional squirrel and rice dish, we could see how food reflects the relationship between people and the land that they call home. As promised, we're going to be using a Dutch oven to cook our meal. We're not entirely sure why they became known as Dutch ovens. One of the prominent guesses is that when Dutch immigrants moved here, they also brought their ovens with them, and they would sell them, and then over time, it became known as the Dutch oven. Very simple concept. It is a pot with a lid that you have to keep hot. These guys were made to withstand campfire flames, and so if you're going to be using one, you need some proper gear. First, to protect your hands, you're going to need a pair of really thick gloves. Then, to protect your gloves and your hands, you're going to want a lid lifter. That way, you're not risking your fingers. Just hook it, lift it up. We're not using campfire flames today. I'll be using charcoal briquettes. And so I have a pair of tongs to move my briquettes and whatnot. These ovens come in a variety of sizes. Today, we're using a 10-inch wide Dutch oven. If you're wondering how you know, each Dutch oven lid has their width on top right here. They're also incredibly versatile ovens. You see, I've got another lid, another 10-inch lid. We're gonna be using that as a skillet today. Since I said skillet, I think it's time to start heating up our Dutch oven. So if you excuse me, I'm gonna go get my charcoals. All right, guys, we've got our charcoal briquettes placed. If you are wondering how many charcoal briquettes you need, we are heating our ovens up to 350 degrees. So for this, you're going to take how wide your Dutch oven is, multiply that by 2, then add about 3 or 4. So I have a 10-inch wide Dutch oven. 10 times 2 is 20. I need at least 20 briquettes. Then I added 3 or 4. It's not exact. You can play around with it a little bit. Because heat rises, you need less coals on the bottom. So I have about 7 or 8, about a third, in a circular pattern underneath my Dutch oven. The rest I put in an even circle on the lid so that we get a nice even bake. Underneath my skillet, I have about 12 coals right here. And since our ovens are heated up, we are ready for our first ingredients that show food reflects the relationship between people and the land that they call home. What we're gonna do is take some butter, and I'm gonna go ahead and take my glove off with it. If you notice the steam coming up, it's because I dropped some butter earlier, trying to get it off. There we go. There we go. Okay, our first ingredient are some native wild onions, and we're just gonna saute them on here, get them nice and brown. While these are browning, you know, I talked about food reflecting the relationship. See, people were able to adapt to this land because even though it was a tough landscape, it still provided ample food and sometimes even protection. So ample food, of course, we've got, if I can grab it, we've got our native wild onions. You're gonna find these closer to bodies of water. Sticking up from the ground, they're gonna look like this. Very easy to spot. All right. Well, these are browning. Another way that this tough landscape provided food was in our squirrels. We're not going to cook the squirrels thoroughly right here. We're just going to brown them kind of locks in some of the flavor. I tell you what, we might need some more butter on here as well. There we go. Now, like I said, this was a tough landscape. Earlier, I talked about personal connections with the river, the ridge, and the Arkansas Delta. By the river, I obviously mean the Mississippi River. By the ridge, I mean Crowley's Ridge, which is described as a narrow band of rolling hills starting in Missouri, ending near Helena, Arkansas. This ridge has provided towns protection from the Mississippi's floods for years and years. And by the Delta, I mean the Arkansas Delta, famous for soybeans and cotton and rice. These still have a little bit to go for browning up. So let's talk a little bit about food throughout the centuries in Arkansas. Native Americans in Arkansas were the Quapaw and the Tunica, at least in eastern Arkansas. This is their home. They would have grown squash, maize, and corn. They would have hunted deer and bear. We don't know of any settlements within the park, but we do know that they could have hunted this area. If we fast forward to 1815, two survey teams under Brown and Robbins started in Arkansas to map the Louisiana Purchase. Each man on the team had their very own job, including a professional chef. We would have called them cooks or cookies. They wouldn't have brought their own meat. Uh-oh. Got a little bit stuck. That happens. They wouldn't have brought their own meat because they would have been hunting for it when they got here. So the land would have provided them game animals like this squirrel here. Over time, communities formed, and then those communities formed towns. In the mid-1830s, towns like Marianna, Helena, Sterling, Arkansas were founded, proving again that even though it was a tough landscape, people were able to adapt to the land because it provided ample food and sometimes even protection. Tell you what, these are just about ready to go on in here. So let me grab my lid lifter. One thing you want to be very careful of, again, we're going to transfer all of this here. You're going to be really careful of how long you keep your lid off of your oven because, of course, that's going to let all of the heat escape. So just really quickly. I thought I sent it flying. I have it. Get some of those onions in there. All right, they're going to finish cooking in there. We are going to add just enough water to cover them, get them to a nice little boil. And there are several different ways you can put a creative spin on this. If you want to put broth in here, put it in there. You can put your peppers, anything you want to kind of give it a little more taste. Go for it. We're just keeping the recipe really simple today. This is going to take, it usually takes me about 5 to 10 minutes to get the squirrel cooked enough that it's ready to come out. So we'll let this sit for just a little bit and check on it here in about 5 to 10 minutes. All right, guys, our squirrel is tender enough now that we can pull it off of the bone. I went ahead and strained it out of the oven. We will put it back in about 10 minutes before the meal is done. But I left the liquid in there because it has formed a nice broth to cook our second ingredient that shows how food reflects the relationship between people and the land that they call home. People were able to adapt the land by introducing new crops and practices to it. In 1904, the first successful rice was harvested. Our second ingredient is rice. It is not a native plant to Arkansas, but did take well after changes to the lands were made. You'll notice that I have it in water. I prefer to wash my rice, and it's just, I find it's easier to go ahead and soak it for about 30 minutes before putting it in a Dutch oven because it absorbs the moisture a little bit better, in my opinion. So, okay, there we go. A lid lifter. Being very quick to put it in there. All right, it's okay if some's left over. For me, it usually takes about 20 minutes for the rice to finish cooking. And I figured rather than just sitting here listening to me talk to you about all of the changes made and things introduced to the land, I thought maybe you'd want to see the park. So let's go. We are here at the confluence between the St. Francis and the Mississippi rivers. Confluence simply means where one river flows into another. So here at the park, the St. Francis River flows into the Mississippi. Not only is this area completely open to the public, it's also been left completely natural. So what you're seeing is similar to the survey teams coming here in 1815 and the native Arkansans long before that. We're here to talk about the Swampland Act of 1850. This act gave the rights to Arkansans to drain the swampland of its water to create farmland. Crops farmed were cotton and rice, which are still profitable and farmed today. All right, guys, this is a longer cooking meal, and so when that happens, you're gonna want to, again, distribute the heat evenly, so you'll move your oven some. How you do this, you start with the pot. You're going to turn it, once I get my handle right, I promise I've done this before, but you're gonna turn it one direction, so we'll turn it clockwise. Get back down, okay, there we go, good enough. And then you'll take the lid and turn it in the opposite direction. All right, I think we're ready for our next spot. We are standing in what was once the town of Sterling, Arkansas. Residents planted different groves of trees from peaches to, where we are, pecan groves. Now, even though they planted these crops, they were a port town, meaning that riverboats traveling the mighty Mississippi would stop here, unload cargo, reload cargo, refuel, and be on their way. Now, over time, the Mississippi changed its course and unfortunately flooded the town. Residents had to move, and there is no longer a Sterling, Arkansas. Even sadder, a changing river is not the only thing that hit East Arkansans hard during this time. All right, guys, we are almost done with our recipe. This rice is looking almost nice and fluffy. It's still got a little bit to cook. So we're gonna go ahead and add our squirrel back into it to finish cooking with the rice. Go. Kind of swirl it around here. And while it finishes up, I think we have time for one more spot to go see. We're standing at Bear Creek Lake at Mississippi River State Park. This is a really popular lake for fishing and kayaking, swimming, what have you. We're really grateful it exists, but it came at a time that was really hard for East Arkansan farmers. The Great Depression hit them hard because the land had been overused. Certain practices had caused the pecan and peach groves to not produce any fruit, and people needed relief. And so jobs were created to build a spillway to form Bear Creek Lake. This was in 1938. The people realized that they had the power to help heal the land. All right, as you guys saw down at Bear Creek Lake, residents realized that their actions had power, whether it was harmful or helpful. So they decided to band together and protect this land so that it could continue to provide. In 1960, residents of Lee and Phillips County petitioned that this area become a national forest, and thus the St. Francis National Forest was created. In 2009, Mississippi River State Park opened within the forest, providing school group tours, kayak tours, guided hikes, answering any questions that you might have. I hope today, by creating this squirrel and rice dish, that you are able to see how food reflects the relationship between people and the land that they call home. One, because people were able to adapt to the land since it provided ample food and sometimes even protection. That they were able to adapt the land by introducing new crops and practices to it. And finally, because they protected the land so it could continue to provide. Please, please remember that you are just as connected to this land as they were, and you are just as powerful as they are. With that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at what we made together. Might take me a second, but I don't want to burn my hand. I think we did well with native wild onions, some Arkansas squirrels, and good old Arkansas rice. If you excuse me, I'm ready to eat.